Sorry for being a little late today. I was watching St. John's versus Arkansas. The game is still on, and my guests are still watching the game. So hopefully they will join me soon. Hello, everybody, and welcome to episode 135 of the longest tenured Denver Nuggets spin-off podcast in the world. Welcome to the DNVR Nuggets' Serbian Corner. My name is Miroslav, and before we begin, please let me remind you to like the video on YouTube. And if you haven't already, subscribe to the DNVR Sports YouTube channel and DNVR Nuggets podcast channel. The audio version is perfect for your commute or to make your office/home office time more bearable. If you want to support the show more directly, you can become a Patreon supporter at patreon.com/MiroslavCuk, just like my Sicko tier supporters Peter Plummer and Daniel Lynch. Patreon supporters will get access to ad-free shows and will get exclusive material from my second trip to Denver in about 4 weeks. Let's start with a short recap of the week. First, it was the Lakers game First Blood. That, Texas, and the Nuggets conceding 40 points in the first quarter. The Lakers came to Denver without 6 of their guys, including LeBron James and Luka Dončić, and their centers were Alex Len and Christian Koloko. But that didn't stop the Nuggets' defense from still finding a way to get scored on time after time. The second quarter was a bit better. The third one was a wash. But then in the fourth quarter, it started like a nightmare, with the Nuggets missing their first 7 field goals. They stabilized when Joker returned to the court and got the lead back. But then they had 2 consecutive turnovers while giving corner threes away. The Lakers had a 3-point lead with 52 seconds to go, but then Nikola forced a 2+1. Jamal made a 3 from the peanut and butter. What? That's not true. Peanut butter and jelly pick and roll, and they put the game away. Reeves and Necht combined for 69 points. Nice. Also, Milton showed that he had some shake. But in the end, 6 out of 8 Nuggets who played were in double figures, and that was enough to escape the embarrassing home defeat. Next, it was the Wizard game, and I will not waste your time describing that game. The Nuggets had everybody but Aaron Gordon, and they played against the worst team in the league. Joker had a 40-point somber double. Jamal had 24 and 7. Westbrook 22 and 11, MPJ 20 and 11. But all that wasn't enough because they didn't play a speck of defense. They allowed 19 made threes, including 5 from Alex Sarr, and they lost the game in embarrassing fashion after a 35-foot Jordan Poole dagger. Shame. Next, the Warriors game. Joker, Jamal, and Christian Brown were all out for this game against the hottest team in the West. Michael Malone started Hunter Tyson at the 2 and Aaron Gordon at the 5. Spencer Jones played for 18 minutes and Vlatko Čančar played for 24. So, of course, the Nuggets pulled off a heroic win because why the hell not? Nothing can surprise us anymore, at least not in March. Jokes aside, it was a very impressive game from the energy standpoint of the Nuggets. Aaron was scoring from everywhere. Peyton was amazing on defense. Westbrook broke his season record for assists. Vlatko did so many little things and had one monster offensive rebound he turned into points. Mike was missing shots but stayed focused on the other parts of the game. Tyson was rebounding and playing defense. Zeke made a 3 again. Spencer Jones was a pest on defense. Just an incredible team effort. Last note, I loved the jumbo closing lineup of Westbrook, Watson, Porter, Čančar, and Gordon. That was a great call by Malone when the Warriors started closing up the gap in the fourth. Second to last, Lakers game First Blood Part 2. No Jamal, no Jokic again. The Nuggets started Russ, Brown, MPJ, Watson, and Gordon. That sounds pretty defensive oriented, right? Well, they conceded 46 points in the first quarter. Luka Dončić didn't see anybody. Not Brown, not Gordon, not Porter, not Watson, nobody. The game got to almost 30-point lead after the third quarter and gave us a rare 12 minutes of garbage time. Gordon had 26 and 11, and Pickett scored 14 off the bench. Other than that, it was a game to forget, hopefully. Finally, last night, the Blazers game. 7 times the Portland Trailblazers won by 19 or more points this season. Sorry, that's not right. 8 times, yeah. They won by 19 against the Nuggets last night. The Nuggets joined New Orleans Magic twice, Charlotte, Phoenix, Brooklyn, and Indiana in accomplishing that feat. The Nuggets had a full roster outside of Nikola Jokić, who is still trying to heal from all the nasty injuries he's dealing with. But that roster was ready to compete against the 12th best team in the West without their 2 centers for about 34 minutes of game time. After that, it was a disaster. The rest will hopefully be forgotten, not by me though. Jamal Murray returned after a 2-game absence with 10 points in 35 minutes. Rebounding against centerless Blazers was non-existent. Okay, come on, calm down, Introduce your guests. Yeah, I got too heated away about this game. I should probably let it go. We'll see. First, the co-host of the Four Corners Denver Nuggets podcast, a husband, a dad, and soon to be the youngest retired person in the world, Peter Plummer is calling from Homer, Alaska. What up, Pete?
Hey, what's up, Miroslav? How you doing?
What's the score on the game?
70-64.
For
1 minute
Arkansas.
left. Yeah.
I'll probably let you watch for another minute before it's probably too late for St. John's to return. Too bad. I was really cheering for them in this game. Just couldn't hit anything from the outside. Last but not least, a Nuggets fan from New Jersey. You're and my favorite NBA draft expert and a middle school basketball coach. It's CT Fazio. Buonasera, CT. I guess it's 5 o'clock already in New Jersey.
It's 5 o'clock somewhere.
Exactly.
Let's
open
what's up,
that
Miroslav?
line.
Thanks for having me on.
Yeah. So, guys, I can see Pete shaking his head. I'm guessing the game is not going the way you hoped. But yeah, we need to talk a bit about another disappointing basketball team, and those are the Denver Nuggets. So let's start with the question, which is the most basic question, and I have been dancing around it all this season. Do we know who this Nuggets team is? And if we do, please do tell. Who wants to start?
I think we kind of do at this point of the season. Game about 10 to 12 games left in the season. This team has not played any semblance of defense throughout the whole year. I know I see people out on the timeline just trying to blame one person for this or that, and it's the collective unit defensively. It's the point of attack defense. We have no rim protection. We have no one will box out defensively at all. And it's just across the board, just really, really poor effort on that end of the floor. So I think defensively we know who they are. I think their offense is pretty dynamic, although I think they do have some limitations as far as their personnel is concerned. But I do at this particular point of the year, I think we know exactly who they are defensively. And I know I see people saying if they're going to change a gear going into the playoffs, I mean, it's possible, but I think I'm going to have to believe that before we come to that conclusion.
Why do you think they're so bad on defense this season? Is it just the personnel losing KCP, losing screen navigation, or is it deeper than that?
I think he's definitely at the forefront of a lot of the problems because having screen navigators is pretty essential to a Jokic defense. Trying to keep guards out of the paint, trying to get them not to turn the corner on Jokic, in hard hedges and blitzes. So I think he is a big reason for the slide defensively, but it's not enough to be a top 10 defense sliding all the way back to bottom portion of the league. I don't think one player is. I'm sorry about that, Will, but I don't think that's really an excuse for the defense sliding that far. I think we've had a lot of slides defensively across the board as far as the personnel is concerned. I think Murray's defense has been really bad this year. I think Jokic's defense has been horrible. MPJ's defense has slid. Gordon's been injured a lot of the year, so I mean that's probably a big part of it. And honestly, too, I think Christian's defense has been a big letdown. Honestly, as far as a guy who was, I was pretty high on his defense coming into the year, but as a stopper on the perimeter has been pretty underwhelming as well. And I think too, I don't know what you guys think, but I just think this team lacks fundamental defensive execution. They don't communicate defensively. It's very easy watching the game, and I tweeted about it last night. They don't communicate defensively. No one is boxing out. I mean, last night, how many offensive rebounds did the Blazers really, outwork the Nuggets on that end of the floor? And I know there was no Jokic out there, right? But even still, like you have personnel that's physical and tall to at least try to combat that. And it's the communications lacking. The box outs are lacking. The switching has been horrible, as we saw last night. So I just think across the board, and again, I think it's probably fair at this point to call out the coaching as well. I think that's like I said, across the board, you could go top to bottom. Even the front office as well. I think everybody is at least a part to be shared of the blame in this disappointing stretch or this year as a whole, honestly.
Pete, who are the Nuggets?
I think they're a one-way team that is pretty good on offense and pretty bad on defense. I agree with everything CT said, but just to add one theory, if you look at the Jokic era Nuggets, they've usually been one of the slower paced teams in the league. And I think this year they've made a concerted effort to run more, because if you run out in transition and get easy baskets, that's going to sort of help make up for your lack of 3-point shooting. So they've been a really good offense this year, but I do think there's a little bit of, by increasing the possessions, more running up and down, naturally, just as a human, you're going to have a little bit less energy for defense if there's more possessions in a game. Then you add on top of the fact that how many times have we seen Malone play Murray and Jokic like 40 minutes, 42 minutes in a game? So, unfortunately, he just doesn't trust the bench enough, and the bench has been pretty bad again this year. So that's just kind of what happens. It's just not a deep team that it's worn down, and they just look worn out, and now you see this is why Jokic is resting a lot.
So, I saw somebody ask that on Twitter today. If I would have to assess where the Nuggets are, as we said, about 70 games into the season, I only care about the playoff outcome of it. And yeah, I would gladly scratch the whole march of basketball and say it doesn't matter, and we expect the team to perform better come playoffs time. It's just that we have no proof other than like 6-7 really good games this season where the Nuggets played really, really good basketball against good competition. So if somebody would ask me what are my expectations from them in the playoffs, I would say that the Nuggets are probably going to end up in the 4th spot, maybe even 5th spot, because I don't think Nikola Jokić is going to return that quickly from this injury. I think they're going to be conservative about it, and I think they're going to prioritize the health to wins this time around. And if we're being honest, the one thing they are supposed to get away from is the first round matchup against the Minnesota Timberwolves or the Lakers, honestly, possibly even the Lakers. So if somebody would ask me, do I think the Nuggets are gonna get to the second round? I think they have about a 55% chance of getting to the second round. It would be higher than that, but it's just that even if you get a favorable matchup, it's still not 100%. You can lose to anybody. And I would say a 55% chance of Nuggets getting to the second round. I think getting to the Western Conference Finals is maybe a 10-15% chance for the Nuggets this time around. Getting to the finals, that's really dicey. That's like a 3 to 5% chance of getting all the way to the finals. And if they get to the finals, that's a 0 from me. Like there is 0 chance they can beat anybody coming from the East this time around. I agree with you, Pete. I agree with you, CT. This is a one-way team that hasn't shown any real defensive prowess this season, and it doesn't seem very solvable. We've seen teams target Jamal Murray for the big chunk of this season on defense, and now they're doing the same to Michael Porter, who doesn't seem right to me physically, honestly. I just think that there must be something wrong with his body, because he doesn't seem to be able to play good isolation defense, which was he was pretty good at the beginning of the season. I don't have any trust in that at the moment as well.
Yeah, I agree. I think it's across the board, honestly. Defensively, it's everybody. Murray can't stop anybody. MPJ can't stop anyone. I mean, you saw it last night. Even Christian, he couldn't stop anyone. It's just so many breakdowns across the board. And I've been advocating a lot to even try playing a lot more zone defense, especially when Jokic comes back, because they can't stop any dribble penetration to the rim. So to combat that, at least try to go zone. And I think in the OKC game was the biggest example of that, where their offense was really, able to outshoot OKC, but they were able to play a bit more better defense, I think, in order to win that game. And I think that was Malone's, obviously, I think that was his best coaching game of the year. He was able to mix and match defenses. He'd go from man, he'd go back to zone, he would go to a full out trap at half court. And I think in games like that now, we see that with the Heat as well. We see with the Heat, the Warriors, they always deploy different defenses. And I think Malone, one of my biggest criticisms of him this year, as of late, I would say, has just been the creativity part. I just don't think there's a lot of innovation and creativity going on both ends of the floor, honestly. Offense, defense. I mean, with Jokic out, I mean, the offense it's like Murray, just save us, give him the ball and try to let him dribble, and I think there's going to have to be more of that in order for them to, seriously compete for a championship. I mean, let alone even to win a first round or second round series.
I want to continue on defense a bit, because I need to address the Lakers game, the second Lakers game when Luka came back. But we're going to do that after this break. Don't go anywhere. So the second Lakers game was without Jamal and without Nikola Jokić. And I guess, was it without Christian Brown too? Yeah, without Christian Brown too. But you could say that they had a lineup with all defensive players. Russ was at the 1. We had Peyton Watson. We had Aaron Gordon. We had Michael Porter. And who was at the 5? Was it the Christian Brown, or I don't even remember what the starting 5 was. But it was like a 5+ defenders or 4+ defenders, and MPJ, who is a long guy at the very least. And that team conceded 46 points in the first quarter. Luka was dissecting everybody. He was hunting MPJ nonstop. But even if he didn't get MPJ on him, he would just play with Aaron. He would play with Peyton. Is there any more proof we need to just say that this is just not a playoff ready defense? Let's start with Pete.
I mean, the signs have been that it's not. CT talk about the OKC game, and I think that what that showed us was Malone can make adjustments, but is the team going to be able to hone in on the game plan and execute the game plan as best as they can? Because I think what's been so frustrating about this season is there's been plenty of times where the team did play good defense for 18, 20 seconds, and then there's a crucial breakdown at the end, that leaves open three, like that Wizards game, or they just can't secure the rebound. So I kind of feel like while there's been fair criticism of Malone this year, I also, agree when he's always said in the years past, like, this is the NBA, man. Like, I can't motivate these guys. If you're not motivated to play, I don't know what to tell you. So if they're not going to play hard, then, to me, that's not really like a coaching issue at the NBA level. That's a player issue. So, if to me, the main differences between the 23 title team and this team are that team just had a higher collective IQ. They, they had some key role players with Bruce Brown and Jeff Green, but I feel like those guys were also just solid players even when they didn't have big games. They just kind of knew where to be defensively, and I think it's just sort of the cumulative effect of having MPJ and Jamal and Jokic all kind of like slower defenders, and then you add in Christian, who's not a bad defender, but he's not the quick defender that KCP is. It's a really slow team, and I just think that teams have figured Denver out. So I think the zone is the only thing that can then save them a little bit. But a good shooting team will figure that out, or somebody like Luka. They have a very limited defensive ceiling, and they pretty much have to play lights out offense to win a series. That's how I look at it.
City, Pete just mentioned the collective IQ of the 2023 team. And yeah, that team had more veterans around the key three guys in Murray, Porter, and Joker. All of the other guys, all of the other five guys that were entering the game were very high IQ guys, good defenders, all of them. And even though there's some defensive talent among the young guys surrounding the same core, we're still talking about the young guys. This is the reason why I was so down on the plan of playing that many young guys around the team, unless your plan was never to win another championship in the next 2 or 3 years and try to reset in some more fair weather times. What do you think?
Yeah, for sure. I've been, obviously I really like doing, draft work and analysis in general, and been able to, try to pinpoint like who Denver would want in the draft. And I think the team probably went too far in one direction. I was an advocate of at least adding, Christian, and he was someone who was a really big difference maker in that first year winning the title, as a rookie, being a contributor to that team. And I think maybe the front office probably missed the mark in thinking they could find another Christian as someone who's a ready-made guy and able to contribute to the rotation. And I think if you look at CB and, as I was scouting him throughout his career, he just was a pretty statistical outlier as far as what he was able to contribute as a ready-made guy immediately. So, adding Peyton to the mix, who was a guy who obviously was criticized a lot in his college career's first year because the production wasn't, matching up to his All-American status that he was as a high school player. And then, Julian was a guy who's a bit older as well on Gonzaga, and then, doubling down with Pickett and Tyson as well and giving those guys guaranteed deals. And I don't even think Pickett has been necessarily bad. Even Tyson as of late has played decently, but just putting your trust in those guys as being rotation ready pieces. I wouldn't even say guys you would expect to be in the championship rotation, but putting your trust and faith in those guys making an impact immediately, I think was a pretty far-fetched maybe assumption. And it also too that they basically cleared the runway for those guys. Like you look at the rotation now, like Bruce is gone, Jeff Green is gone, KCP's gone. Those three guys from the championship team, and those were veteran players, right? And you replaced them with guys, I think Russ has played about as well as you really could have expected this year, in a 6-man role. But if you look further down the bench, I mean, it's all young guys basically. Zeke, Peyton, Julian, Tyson, Pickett, and it's not even like there was any kind of competition for those guys, right? Like there was no other veteran guys signed even to break in case of emergency. There's really no one else to go to at this particular point. And I think Vlatko as well, he's been injury plagued for the last 2 years, which is stunk because I actually thought he could be at least like a 9th man type for them to help out. But yeah, I think that's the predicament that the Nuggets kind of find themselves in. I think it was probably a miss of the mark by the front office, trying to double down on their draft plan and trying to keep the core together. I just don't think they probably added the requisite replacements after the championship year.
The roster is definitely flawed. You can see when Michael Malone goes to a 3-guard lineup. First of all, you go to 3-guard lineups because you want to be smaller than the other team, because you have a lot of shooting and you want to be quicker than the other team. And the Nuggets have the quickness of Russell Westbrook, but other than that, they're just not a good shooting team. And they still have Nikola Jokić as a slow center that doesn't work that great with that philosophy, I think. So going to a 3-guard lineup is almost always a disaster for the Nuggets. They just need to hold ground on the big lineups. And this is why Russ was so amazing when he was replacing Jamal. When Jamal was injured this season, he was really good stepping in for him. He is not as effective coming off the bench because he doesn't have Nikola Jokic's help as much as when he was in the starting lineup. So that's an easy part to parse. That's an easy part to analyze. What's a bit more difficult to analyze is the coaching, and we don't know what goes around behind the closed doors, what the guys do in the locker room, what the guys do in those rare days when they can actually train together between the games. But if we would play a blame game, in June 2023, the Nuggets won a championship demolishing competition in the process. Almost 2 years later, this is where we are. Who or what is to blame for the Nuggets' downfall? Is it just the roster construction, or can we point to some other stuff too? Pete?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's probably a little bit of everything. I think we should also mention that the NBA has gotten better. I mean, in 23, the Celtics had a pretty bad collapse in the East Finals, losing to the 8 seed Miami Heat. And the Heat won fair and square. It was a best of 7 and they beat them. But it was also clear that the Nuggets were a mismatch for the Heat. We could tell that in the first quarter of game 1. So, I know hindsight is 2020, but I really do feel like if the Celtics pull that series out, the finals are probably a lot better. I'm not saying the Nuggets wouldn't have won, but I don't think it would have been just a quick, 4-1 gentleman's sweep of the Celtics. And then you see the Celtics win it next year because they got, another year better. Also added Drew Holiday and Porzingis, that helped. But as far as the Nuggets, I think, losing Bruce Hurt, that was kind of expected because they could max out how much they paid him. Losing KCP obviously hurt because, they wanted him to opt into that deal and extend the contract. And Orlando gave him so much money that, it just didn't make sense for Denver to go on the second apron, which, hurts us this year. But I really do understand it because of just the penalties that brings to you now in this new agreement where, yeah, you could have paid to keep him, but then it would have hamstrung the moves you can make, but it also would have, frozen draft picks down the line. So I think I understand not, completely wanting to mortgage your future, even though some people are saying like, oh, you got to just maximize Jokic's prime win now. That's fair. But, he also hasn't been that good this year. So I don't think we need any more bad contracts on the team. I think what's really hurt is Jamal and MPJ not progressing. I mean, they were good in the title run, good enough, but they've kind of just stagnated or even gotten, I don't know about gotten worse, but they stay inconsistent, right? I mean, I think we'd both agree that for max players, they probably don't give you as much as you hope to get. And I think that the way the Nuggets roster salary is constructed, so much money going to the starting lineup, they have to be better, if the bench is going to have this few amount of resources. It just, there's been a little bit better lately going on, but for the most part, when Jokic sits, it's still just not a very good basketball team, and that's the problem.
What do you think, CT?
Yeah, I think it's a combination of everything. I think the front office for sure is definitely their plan after the championship. I think, they knew that they had, if they were going to keep the core four, they would have to kind of maneuver and navigate the situation a bit differently. And I just think they went really far in one direction with the draft, that they didn't give themselves a way out in that aspect of it. Um, like I said, there was no really replacement for Bruce. Jeff Green was serviceable at least, and there kind of really wasn't any replacement for him. They gave Zeke Naji a 4-year extension, which again, like I think Zeke has played better lately, but he's as of late, I think he's looking a bit more unplayable again. So it's just tough going all that way in on young guys. And I think Pete said, I think I would agree. I think the core four has probably regressed a bit since then across the board. I think defensively it's been the main drop off where it's just not serviceable really at this point that they're playing the defense that they are. Um, and yeah, like I said, across the board, I said even coaching as well. I think coaching, same thing. Front office, the players, it could probably be split evenly across the board. I think honestly, and again, I've been saying this too. I don't think the season's over. It's not over yet. There's a lot more season left to be played, and I'm usually the optimist guy, but I mean, last night's game was pretty atrocious. So I was pretty disappointed in that. But I think there's still a long way to go, especially if Jokic can come back and maybe steady the ship a bit. I think there's still some optimism for the season to play out pretty well.
I like both of you guys' points here. One thing about coaching that I didn't like for all these years, but when you win a championship, there's no point in addressing some stuff you don't like. I never liked the fact that the Nuggets starting five play by far the most minutes together in the league. Like they double the next heaviest minute starting five in the league, and that has some consequences. The team from 2023 lost Bruce because they couldn't keep him because of the CBA. They lost Jeff Green because they didn't want to pay him $8 million a year or whatever Houston gave him back then. So they didn't improve the roster significantly for the next season, and the season after that, after the game 7, they couldn't acquire any good players like Boston did 2 summers ago when they traded for KP and they traded for Drew Holiday. And the reason they could have traded for those guys is because they had a lot of guys that were playing for Boston and they were viewed as positive, good players, like Robert Williams, like Grant Williams, like Marcus Smart. All of those guys went away in trades, and they flamed out, by the way. Neither of them is good anymore. But they had a perception of being good because they played in a good system, and they could have been assets in trades. Nuggets don't have any assets at all. Like, unless you want to trade Christian Brown, I don't see who other than your core four you can trade and get anything in return. So yeah, they don't have a lot of wiggle room there to improve their roster. So I think it's equal parts the coaching and the front office fault for this. And by the way, the new CBA didn't help at all. Like, or you can say that Calvin Booth didn't want to go over the second apron so he could have more flexibility later, and he used that flexibility to do nothing. So yeah, it's a tough look, but it is what it is. And yeah, we are staying with the team, and we hope for a miracle. As I said, I still give them like a 3% chance to get to the finals this season. That's not a lot, but that still means that I have some play of hope despite all. Okay, let's take one more short break, and then I want to talk a bit about the post All-Star break stats on the Nuggets. Don't go anywhere. Okay, we are back. So The Nuggets are playing a 500 basketball since the All-Star break. They are 8-8, and Michael Porter and Russell Westbrook both played in all 16 games and are minus 60 and minus 73 respectively in raw plus minus. Peyton Watson is minus 62, even though he has played in only 10 games since the break. By the way, the Nuggets were 5-5 in those 10 games. How do you guys assess these three guys since the All-Star break? Do you agree with me that all of them have kind of fallen off after the All-Star break?
Yeah, I think a little bit. I think with Mike, he's coming back from an injury. He had that hamstring injury before the break, and he was playing some great basketball. He had like 3 straight 30-point games. And again, it's not an excuse to for his play. I think his 3-point shot has been definitely a lot more streaky, after the break, and defensively he hasn't been good either. Rebounding has been tough as well. Honestly, I think the minutes probably has been a big factor in catching up to these guys too. I think Mike has played a ton of minutes this year. Trying to steady the ship in the early season, and I think that's kind of caught up to him and Russ in particular as well. With all those minutes being played, but I think honestly, it's a lot of it just being tired. I think a lot of them are tired at this particular point of the year, and I think they should probably get a rest game coming up. Those two in particular, and then with Watson, he was hurt as well. I think he had a knee sprain, so he was out. I think he's actually been playing a bit better lately, as far as his offensive his game is concerned. And I thought versus Golden State, he was fantastic. In that 5 switch all lineup. He's playing the 2, so he's playing a bit more up the lineup instead of playing down, which I really liked. I think Malone should probably look into more lineups with, having Watson play the 2 or having bigger players play up a little more and having that versatility out there. So I would say it's a combination of, I think, maybe a slump, but also too, I think these guys are tired just from playing so many minutes in the early part of the year. I think it's catching up to them at this point. So. And it's tough with the seeding because you're in a seeding battle for home court, and I think the Nuggets need to get home court in this playoffs. I don't think there's any debate about it. I think they're a good road team, but you would like to have home court going into the playoffs. So tough. They're in a tough predicament at the moment, especially with Jokic's injury. We don't really know how long he's going to be out for. I saw he's out for tomorrow, so that's already another game within the playoff race that he's going to miss. So it's a tough situation to be in for sure.
What do you think, Pete?
Yeah, I think Mike and Russ have definitely been a little worse since the break. I mean, I hadn't considered that maybe Mike had an injury. I know you mentioned that. It's possible. I think he's definitely struggling. I don't really know why. Maybe just teams are paying more attention to him or just struggling with his confidence or something. And then Russ, I think, really just has been playing so much better in the first half of the year than I expected. I think this is a little bit more of like the Russell Westbrook experience I expected. So
regression to the mean.
Yeah, I don't think he's been awful, but it's definitely not surprising to see him have a game with like 10 turnovers. We probably thought we'd see that earlier. But I have to say, with Peyton Watson, I wouldn't put him in there with those other 2 guys because unfortunately, I hate to be so negative, but to me, he's never really had like an up part of the season. I just feel like he hasn't really progressed in the way that I hoped. Yeah, he had the nice game against Oklahoma City where he hit all those corner threes, but for the most part, I just don't think he's a smart basketball player. He's got tools defensively, but every time he gets the ball in the fast break, I kind of do this like, I cringe because I'm just like, how is this going to go? And it usually ends up in a brick layup. And he's just one of those guys that I would move off of because I honestly say, like, I don't root for guys to fail ever, but I kind of feel like Peyton's going to be a guy that's going to go to another team, and I don't think he's going to go well. We always joke about, like, Malone can't figure it out with bigs like Hartenstein and Huff, and then they go somewhere else and play better. I just don't think Peyton Watson is really, like, an NBA player other than, a few defensive possessions here and there. But I do at least agree with CT's point about, like, when you put him at the 2, at least he can use more of his skills. The problem is Malone doesn't do that very often. He always has him playing the 3 or the 4 times, which is just crazy. He's given up like 30, 40 pounds to some power forward, and it's surprising that we, can't get a rebound. It's like he shouldn't be playing the 4. So I think he's matchup dependent, but I wouldn't be shocked if he gets benched in the playoffs again like he did last year.
Do the Nuggets have the roster build not to play Peyton at the 4? Do they have enough shooting on the team not to play Peyton at the 4? I agree with you, by the way. I would rather see him playing at the 2 than at the 4, even though the 3 is probably his natural position. But I just don't think they can afford, having that many non-shooters in the lineup.
Yeah, it's like Malone is it's a job that's very tough for him, and I don't envy the position he's in, honestly, with the personnel that he has out there. But um, yeah, I mean, with Julian, I think he should be back with pretty soon. And I know a lot of people were kind of relieved that he was out because they thought his defense was tanking the whole team, which shocker for everybody. The defense is still terrible. Um, and I do think they actually need some of his offense off the bench because he's a microwave scorer. And the Nuggets kind of go through these lulls on offense where they can't score the ball. And he's another guy, at least he's tall, he could shoot. I think he's an underrated playmaker, honestly. If you give him the ball, he could kind of run some pick and roll with Yoke, here and there. And I think getting him back will be I don't know if Malone's gonna go back to him, honestly. I think he should, but um I think with Watson, it's going to be tough because I think he's going to have to play in the playoffs. I don't think there's any other bench guys I trust, at least over Russ. Even at this point, is the sixth guy in the rotation. I don't think out of like Pickett, Zeke, Tyson, or anybody else, like I would trust playing over Watson in a high leverage situation. And I think kind of to end the season, I think Malone's going to have to find some semblance of guys who can play in the playoffs. Can Vlatko play in the playoffs? We saw against Golden State. There was obviously some highs and lows, but he trusted him to close the game, and they won that game. I think it might be at least a look to go back to him, and I don't know why Tyson didn't play last night after he played pretty well against Golden State. I thought that was kind of a tough decision there, but I mean, I think we can speak to the mentality of the team too as well. For me, I think since the championship, I think they've this is me speaking as a coach, but I think they've had a bit of a soft mentality, honestly. Whether that's physically, getting out rebounded when things go wrong, they kind of just wilt away, and they don't fight back for the most part. So I think that's going to have to change if they're going to, you know, try to make an extended run of the playoffs here coming up. I think it's all around. I think it's their play. I think it's their mentality. I just think across the board, you can just tell that this team at the moment is not I would say a well-connected bunch either.
It's very obvious that Colin Booth at the beginning of the season viewed Peyton Watson as the 7th guy on this roster, 8th guy at the very worst. And yeah, he hasn't been consistent. And as Grace mentioned in the chat right just now, it's really hard to parse what are his real skills, except for being really quick and long on defense, and everybody can appreciate that. For me, all of those things are marginal comparing to the fact that we have a full roster of Denver Nuggets without Nikola Jokić getting a 20-point defeat against the Portland Trailblazers without 3 of their guys. And it's been 10 years. We still have no real offense and no real defense without Nikola Jokić in the game. The score, I think they are actually around 35%, maybe 40% team, 40% win team without Nikola Jokić. That's not good enough. That is not gonna take you to playoffs. We need to think about situations. Nikola Jokić is now 30, and he might miss a month here and there. And the Nuggets just don't have a plan B at all for him missing a month. So we come back to what you guys said before. It's our max contract guys who are just not max contract players. It's something they will need to. I think they will need to figure out this summer or next summer. Maybe they want to have another gap year. I've seen comments like, no, they were never supposed to win this year. Yeah, maybe not even next year. But I'm not calling for firing of Colin Booth. I'm not calling for firing of Michael Malone, just go back to the drawing board and figure something out. There might still be time to get something more cohesive, and hopefully the team might start playing better with Nikola and without Nikola on the court. Okay, let's take our last short break, and then I want to talk a bit about Aaron Gordon and Nikola Jokić. Don't go anywhere. Okay, we are back. So Aaron Gordon, since the All-Star break, has attempted 5.2 3-pointers per game, which is not a small volume anymore. That's a mid volume, and he's made 54% of those 3-pointers. I don't have the numbers for the corner threes in front of me, but I think they're even more impressive than the total number. Is this 10-game sample too small to make grand takeaways before the playoffs, or do we have a reincarnation of Ray Allen on our team all of a sudden?
Yeah, I think AG, his shooting, I think, there's definitely been an improvement, whether that's been in his mechanics or some of his base, shooting that he's done. I'm not a shot person, but I can just tell that there is definitely some difference in his shot for sure. But I think with him shooting the way that he has so far, I think that's going to change the Nuggets offense a bit going to the playoffs, because teams, I think, are still going to dare him to shoot the ball, but I think it's going to be less than what we saw in the past 2 playoff runs where teams were just daring him to shoot. And last year, I think he shot 29% in the regular season from 3. So it was definitely a big down year, and he's shooting a lot better this year. So I think with that, you kind of could give him the ball a bit more, and they can be a playmaker instead of having Jamal just, run the offense a bit with Yoke. I think you give him the ball a bit more like we saw against the Wolves last year. But I think his offensive game has definitely gotten a lot better, and I think he's more versatile, especially with his 3 falling a lot more this year, that you can play him in a bit more different, settings and situations. So is his 3-ball real? I mean, I think at this point of the season, I think I trust it a lot more than last year. I'll say that. But I do think teams are still going to dare him to shoot and beat you from 3 in the playoffs. But if he's shooting like that, it definitely changes the equation for the Nuggets offense as a whole.
How do you feel about it, Pete? Are you comfortable seeing him taking an early 3-point shot in like semi fast break situations?
I still feel weird about it because I can say that I'm confident in it, but when AG hits that first 3 in the first quarter, my brain immediately goes to, oh no, he's going to take like 8 threes tonight. And it's not that I'm not worried that he can't hit them. It's just, I want him attacking the basket. He's so big and strong and physical and athletic that I actually kind of feel like most matchups he's letting guys off the hook if he's taking the 3. Now, if it's later on the clock and the defense is sagged in, I get it. But those early ones, I'd rather him attack the basket, get the other team in foul trouble, let us to the defense. I thought that was one thing that, him and Westbrook kind of were really good at early in the year when the offense was clicking. So, I get it. Like, as you get older, you got to change your game a little bit, and he's going to lose some athleticism. But I don't know. I guess I yearn for the AG of 2 years ago, the 23 AG, in the dunker spot, leading the league in dunks, basically getting way more easy layups than these 3-pointers.
Yeah, but speaking of attacking the rim, he's been more explosive recently. Don't you agree?
Yeah, a little bit. I think he did say, I think recently, that his body's starting to come back. So that's a good thing. But we needed to come back on defense because I feel like he's probably had his worst year defensively as a Nugget.
What do you think, Pete? CT?
Yeah, I think he's, AG's been the linchpin of the defense, holding that kind of unit together. Him and KCP for the better part of 2 years. And, just to kind of relate to what Pete said, I think the offense has definitely changed from a schematic standpoint without KCP out there, with AG being in the dunker spot, because teams aren't guarding Christian from the 3-point line. I think you can maybe run AG a bit more in the dunker spot if you have Julian out there instead of Christian. And then the defense probably gets to whatever the worst level of defense imaginable. That would be that lineup. So, um, but yeah, I think offensively, like I said, if his 3-pointer if he's shooting the way he is now, and especially would like to see him attack the basket a bit more too, and he looks a lot better athletically lately. If you can kind of combine that on one with his offense, I think we're seeing it the past couple games where he's actually been trying to carry the Nuggets offense, and it's been good in some spots, especially against the Warriors. I thought he was fantastic in that game. He was the best player on the floor. I think going forward, if you can have that offense from him, I think it's just a bonus, especially what we've seen this year with teams scheming Jokic the way they have. I think him like being able to make teams pay, for leaving him open and triple teaming Jokic or putting 4 guys on Jokic at one time. I think that can help at least alleviate some pressure off of him.
Yeah, no Jokic rules if you have a 50+% guy shooting the threes, and yeah, let's hope it holds up in the playoffs, because teams cannot afford leaving guys wide open and getting 3 consecutive threes in their face because of it. So yeah. Let's just hope. Mike is shooting 32% from the 3-point line since the All-Star break. That's not gonna cut it. That's a big problem. Aaron Gordon is amazing. Another guy who is struggling behind the 3-point arc since the All-Star break is the guy who was like number 1 or number 2 in 3-point percentage for a big chunk of this season. That's Nikola Jokić, who is now falling down to, I think, 42-43% on the season. But since the All-Star break, he's been only 18 of 63 from the 3-point line. And let me see, I can divide by 63. That's around 28.5%. Is this concerning? Is it the elbow? Is it the shoulder injury? Or do we think he is regressing to the mean a bit late in the season?
I definitely think he's regressing to the mean. Hasn't really bothered me. I mean, it's like a bonus when they go in, but I never thought he was like a 48% 3-point shooter. I mean, the shot did look better this year. I know he talked about doing some work in the offseason, so it can be improved, but 48% is pretty blazing hot. So I think it's just he started hot. He's been cold recently, but I do think he can level out as like a 38 to 40% 3-point shooter. As long as that risk is right by the playoffs, I think he can make enough for our teams to respect him.
What do you think, CT?
Yeah, I think his 3-pointer, especially to begin the year, I would say halfway through the year, it looked a ton better. Just from a form standpoint, I think he was like he has like a shot where he really like launches it back. Now it's kind of a bit more forward and a bit quicker of a release. So yeah, I think I agree with Pete. I think he's kind of regressed to the mean a little bit. He definitely had a scorching start to the year. Shooting 48% is crazy. Albeit, I think the volume wasn't as high as people thought.
But it was still his highest volume of his career.
100%, definitely was substantial for sure. I think it could be that injury with the elbow that's kind of been affecting his 3-pointer. But I do think he has to be a bit more opportunistic with that shot going forward, because the Nuggets are going to need him to space the floor at times. Play pick and pop with Jamal and Russ, and try to attack from instead of I think schematically, playing him in the post exclusively is a bit more of a kind of a rough look, because that's where teams could just collapse the paint on him. And we saw it against the Lakers. We're doing that. A couple other teams this year have just sold out on him in the paint. So I think him having that inside out game, we're playing, more outside in, attacking from the 3-point line, attacking closeouts, getting to his floater. I think that'll make for a bit more versatile, offense from him, and kind of be tougher to guard for the opposition. So hopefully he can start, shooting the ball a bit better, which I think he will. I trust the jump shot not to be 48%, but I do trust it to be a weapon, at least in the playoffs, that he can go back to. Because against the Timberwolves last year I think him losing the jump shot was pretty tough. I don't think that was the reason for them losing, but it was tough as far as the offense was concerned, because it didn't generate a lot of good looks in that aspect. So hoping that it can bounce back, coming up as we approach the playoffs coming up.
Before we go, I'd like to give a shout out to Jamal Murray, who's been really good since the All-Star break. Yes, he was bad last night, but that was his first game after returning from the injury. He will hopefully be better next time around. He's shooting 49% from the field and 45 from the 3-point line since the All-Star break. Although not on as big of a volume we would like to see. He's at about 6.6 3-pointers per game. Like, come on, like those are rookie numbers in 2025 NBA guys. Like, there are so many guys shooting 10 threes a game. So I hope he can live that a bit too. He's been good. Mike has been trying to create his shot a bit more lately, and he wasn't very successful with that. We always say that they need to figure out to get the ball to Mike more, but then I don't love when I see the ball in Mike's hands on non-advantageous situations. They need to find a way to get the ball to Mike in the position when he can execute and when he can finish. And just asking him to be quicker than a 6'4" guy guarding him at the perimeter, that's not gonna work well. Do you agree with this final assessment before we go?
Yeah, I think so for sure. I've been critical of. It's not even like giving him the ball and like letting him operate in pick and rolls because I don't think that's his advantage. Honestly, he could hit pull up threes, out of it. We've seen it at times, but I think a lot of it is. I think it's on both the staff and Mike, to get open. Sometimes Mike just stands in the corner and he's not like you should go to the ball, whether it's like running a pick and pop or trying to cut off the ball, things like that. I think there's more opportunistic ways for him to get. He should be scoring at least like 20, like I think at least like 22 a night. And he's been again overall this year. I think he's been as good as you can hope for. I think he's had a bit of a rough stretch as of late, but I think there's ways. I think for the staff and on him to get him more involved in the offense for sure. I think we saw it in those games against the Magic, and those 3 games where the 30 plus. I think we really saw like Murray was out, but I do think that there was more of an opportunity for him to catch off the ball. Jokic was really finding him at certain times, and I think they kind of have to get back to that. But yeah, I mean, Grace said he can't get himself open even when they're trying to get him the ball. Yeah, at times it's been tough trying to get him the ball as of late. But I think with Jokic coming back, I think that'll be something where it'll be a big help in that aspect of getting his offense back on track.
Yeah, I think one thing that CT mentioned on Twitter earlier that's kind of bothered me about the coaching staff is like the lack of creativity. One thing that they could do to help Mike get easy buckets this year is with AG shooting so much better from 3, you could run some plays where you just kind of switch the roles. Like, why not put MPJ on the block, have him set some screens for a flex cut and then flash, or just even use him in the dunker spot. Because like you said, if he's getting guarded by a 6'4" guy, that's he's going to be able to get into him and mess up his dribble and not let him pull up as easily. But those 6'4" guards aren't used to guarding in the paint. So I know MPJ isn't the most physical guy, but we've seen him be a pretty good finisher. And Jokic is such a great passer that if they could maybe just run a little more stuff for him to get the ball closer to the basket, I think that could really help get him going.
Yes.
Because so much it's like, here's the ball coming off a screen 20 feet from the basket. And if the defense is good, he ends up just having to kick it out again. Earlier in the season, he was getting that floater going a little bit, but like you said, he might be dealing with an injury or something because he just has not looked as aggressive lately, aside from just missing shots.
So I'm going to list you guys the remaining 11 games of the season, and I have a very specific reason for that. So the Nuggets are going to play the Rockets on Sunday, and then the Bulls, the Bucks, the Jazz, Timberwolves, Spurs, Warriors, Pacers, Kings, Grizzlies, and Rockets again. And I'm saying this because I know, Pete, you and Ray like to record Four Corners only after Nuggets wins. So I don't see a lot of opportunities here. Like the Bulls game might come too soon. Not sure if Joker is going to play in that one. Maybe after the Jazz game or after the Spurs game. I'm not feeling that great about any of these. What are your predictions? When can we expect the next show of Four Corners? Denver Nuggets podcast?
Let's see.
It's on hiatus.
I'll say first week of April.
First week of April. Okay, I'm going to hold you to that. City, how is your big board coming up?
It's I actually do think Jokic is going to come back for the homestand. If I were to
Mhm.
guess, I don't think he's going to be out for that much longer, but hopefully they can start stacking some wins together there, because they also play some of the opponents that are in their kind of range in the playoffs as well. So if they get some wins there, I think maybe they could get some advantageous seeding. But yeah, as far as my big board's going, I released my volume 1, I think 2 weeks ago. So we're getting into draft season coming up. But yeah, going pretty well. We're in March Madness right now. Unfortunately, my Johnnies were out. I had Pete and Miroslav was tuned in to watch the game today, which is pretty cool. But yeah, big board's coming along pretty well. So we're approaching the draft, which is one of my favorite times of the year. But Nuggets fans, don't worry. There'll be no draft picks this year. So you won't have to worry about any picks coming into the fold. Well, at least right now, we don't know. We can't really predict that coming into the end of the season, but we'll see.
Yeah. Who knows? Draft night is crazy, and anything can happen. Well, almost anything can happen on draft night. Okay, that is all I've prepared for you this week, my dear listener. And please, with the cherry on top, take the word prepared very loosely. Be well, be safe, be kind to everybody. Call your mom, and until next week, Jared Vanderbilt.
Just remember.